Certain rules, but not all the rules in F1, we're also going to touch on as the season progresses. Again, my goal is to get everyone sort of caught up so that they can be proficient in all things F1 while still growing. We're all going to go on this together. This season should prove to be completely unpredictable. What won't be is the fact that on this YouTube channel, I'm going to teach you rules, little terms, people, all this as we move forward. Teach you about the tracks, teach you about just a little bit of that history of F1 without diving too deep. There is some interesting things that went on in the recent history, as well as way back in the 70s, that's too good to ignore. But moving forward, the rules of F1. In no particular order, you cannot refuel in a race in F1. There was a time when you did and you could. However, these machines are absolute scientific marvels. The engine, 1.6 liter V6, tiny. They slapped 2 turbos on it and an electronic power boost power unit capable of a total of 1,000 horsepower at the drop of a hat. All of this horsepower is capable out of an engine with the same displacement, if not less, than your Toyota Yaris. Each team has 3 different compounds to choose from of tires from none other than Pirelli. However, depending on the race, depending on the track, those 3 compounds change. I'll explain here in a second. First up, you have your softs, you have your intermediates, aka inters, or your mediums, and then you have your hard compound. Now, they all have different colors, and that kind of makes it really easy to tell who, while they're driving on track, is running soft tires, or hard tires, or inters, aka intermediates. There is a 4th mystery tire, simply known as rain tires, and while you're only allowed to pit just a couple of times in F1 during a race, if it is to rain in the middle of a Grand Prix, you can pit as many times as you want, and you can opt for those rain tires. Another thing about tire strategy, which, believe me, it's always changing. I'm always learning more and more about tire strategy with F1 teams because everyone's kind of got their own secret sauce or ideas of what might be best. Sometimes, if it is merely a light rain, a driver might actually opt for an intermediate tire as opposed to a full-fledged rain tire. Rain tires are treaded, unlike the other race tires, and they're usually harder. But again, even though the soft compound might be one way at Bahrain, that same soft tire compound with the same color on the outside, color lettering, which will be red, might be a different flavor, different sauce, different recipe at a different track later in the year. Pirelli is always mixing these things up, trying to keep the drivers and teams honest. I don't know, it makes things pretty interesting. I don't follow tire strategy too deeply. I try and just enjoy the racing for what it is. Another rule about Formula One that you may or may not know is after qualification, aka quali, if something were to have happened during qualification to the gearbox, aka transmission, if something were to happen to the transmission or the engine, aka the power unit, and the team were to make changes or simply replace the entire unit as a whole, on race day, they are forced to start from the back of the pack. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It does not matter if the team, during qualification, laid down the fastest or second fastest or third fastest lap before the failure happened. You still, once you make that change, a team still has to start on race day from the back of the pack. And again, you've heard me mention the ground effect era. Expect a huge hierarchical change in both mid-pack and back markers, potentially even the lead cars, the same 3 or 4 teams that typically lead any Grand Prix or the overall Constructors' Championship with Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari. In my opinion, those are the 4 teams with the fastest pace. You might could throw AlphaTauri in a close 5th, but you never know with Pierre Gasly. He is capable of finding speed out of cars that theoretically shouldn't have it. Also out for 2022 is Honda. Honda is unofficially out as an engine constructor in Formula One. They announced last season that it would be their last season in F1. However, with their relationship with Red Bull, they essentially left their design and everything pertaining to that design in Red Bull's hands, letting Red Bull develop their engine based off of that Honda design. And to kind of nod to Honda, HRC, aka Honda Racing Corporation, still has a badging on the side of both AlphaTauri's and Red Bull's cars, directly in front of the rear wheels on their liveries. But yes, Honda is out, and officially as an engine constructor is Red Bull, yep, the energy drink company. They also have a clothing line, aka AlphaTauri, hence the F1 team's name. Those two teams are big brother, little sister. Red Bull, big brother, AlphaTauri, little sister. While AlphaTauri, aka Toro Rosso in recent history, was the official feeder team for Red Bull, that official relationship is rather dissolved. However, they still acknowledge one another as big brother, big sister, and have a little bit of an unofficial relationship. AlphaTauri technically being a customer team, meaning they buy their engine from another team. They happen to buy their engine from Red Bull. They both use the Red Bull engine, aka we'll call them the Honda Ghost engine. That's my term, not anyone else's. But it is a Red Bull power plant. Pretty cool. But with this new ground effect era, all bets are off for all the teams. What are ground effects? Essentially, by use of Venturi tunnels, I'll define those here. It creates a low pressure system moving underneath the car, downforce from the top of the car, downforce, creating grip, traction, pressure on the surface, if you will. That's what helps these cars stay stuck to the ground, especially when going around a turn. Historically, the cars did not have ground effects. They relied more on the typical wings and canards that they usually have, along with the addition of barge boards. But gone are the barge boards from the side pods. Oh, yeah, side pods. And here we have ground effects. I hope that explains something. Maybe if you were around in the 90s during the tuner car era, you remember ground effects being put on just about any JDM car you could find. Those ground effects weren't really functional. They were more for form. But either way, they looked really cool. Hashtag Fast and Furious. Ground effect era is here to stay. And what's really interesting is the turbo hybrid engines are still here. They will be gone in a few seasons, along with a new power plant being adopted by F1. What that is going to be, no one really knows yet. Also, for the near future, expect one, possibly two, new engine constructors to enter Formula One. More about that in a future episode. Lastly, we're going to cover nomenclature, aka terms that are synonymous with Formula One. These are actually pretty cool. And again, these are in no particular order. Where do we start? Okay, quali. Also known as qualification, it is purely the race before the race, unless you're a sprint weekend, which we'll cover later. But there's not a sprint happening this weekend, so no need to cover it. Qualification is purely a race against time. It is a time trial. There are some other cars on the track while it is going on. However, the cars aren't necessarily racing one another. They are only racing themselves. Quali is broadcasted on TV. Even here in the United States, free to watch as long as you have ESPN or access to it. Tons of fun to watch quali. Sometimes quali is actually more fun to watch than the race, depending on who's going at it, who's having success that weekend. I absolutely love it. And however you finish against the time during quali is where you start on the grid on Sunday. Unless you make changes to the gearbox, aka transmission, or the engine. Next up, these two words are kind of, they pertain to one another. Sectors. Every F1 track, all 22, even the new track in Miami, will have 3 sectors. Every track in Formula One is very, very similar in overall length. Regardless, it is all broken down into 3 sectors. In those 3 sectors, sometimes there's 4 of these, sometimes there's only 3 of these. It depends. You have a DRS zone. DRS is the word we're getting at here. It stands for drag reduction system. DRS pertains to the rear wing of the vehicle. I'll feature the AlphaTauri car here. And it is here at the rear wing that it sort of acts as a flap. When a particular car is trailing another car only within a certain amount of time between the two, meaning if they're about a second to a second and a half apart, F1 will notify that trailing driver, you have DRS, and they'll be able to pull up behind the car, flick a switch on the steering wheel, allowing that rear wing to become horizontal. It gives a car about a 20 horsepower boost of sorts, and allows them to pass the car both quicker and safely than without it. It's an interesting part of a race, and it doesn't matter if the car in front of you has been lapped or is not. As long as they are physically in front of you, you can have DRS. You'll also see DRS in practice and qualification, even though nobody is in front of the cars. Pretty cool. Next up is power unit. This one is quick and simple, aka the engine. Again, the engine is a 1.6 liter design, V6 with 2 snails slapped on the side with a power unit on the back that is electronic, thus making the car a hybrid. The car is put out about 1,000 horsepower per, and even though it is theoretically the same design, everyone has their own tweaks on it, hence why there are 4 engine constructors. The 4 engine constructors in Formula One are Renault, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. Next up, I just said the word a second ago, constructors. You have the 10 teams. Each team is considered a constructor. You also have the engine constructors, and there are only 4. However, in Formula One, there is a competition for the best constructors, aka the Constructors' Championship, different than the overall World Championship, but still important nevertheless. Every team principal, every team director, they're all going after this just as much as the drivers are going after the World Championship title. Because every part of these cars is made from hand, there are very few parts that actually teams purchase from one another. Looking at you, Haas. Haas buys all the parts F1 will allow from Ferrari. Having to develop the rest of the car themselves, that is a rabbit hole in and of itself. We won't get into it today, but in short, those are what constructors are. That's what they do. And lastly, the team principal. Actually, last 2. The team principal, aka the team director. You got to remember, why not just call them the director? This is English. F1 is based out of the UK. Lots of terms are prim and proper, so that's why we use the term principal. Last term for you is steward or stewards. This is a love-hate thing. You have a steward and you have a race director. Michael Massey was a race director for last season. He is no longer in that position. I can hear a lot of you cheering right now. These are simply F1's race officials. They come from the FIA, the governing body of F1, and pretty much every other type of motorsport on the planet. Stewards often get way too involved with events, determining the consequences and reactions of things that take place on the track. And I think inconsistent is their middle name. That creates drama. Drama is F1. Again, it's a 4-wheeled circus. In today, if you have any questions about Formula One whatsoever, leave them in the comments down below. I will get to each of them as well as feature them in future episodes. I cannot believe race weekend is finally here. Even if it is Bahrain, not typically one of my favorite tracks, but I still love it regardless. I'm looking forward to it. If you don't know who to pull for, what's your favorite color? If it's pink, pull for that car. Yeah, there's a pink car. If it is orange, we call it papaya. There's one of those too. If you happen to drive a Mercedes, pull for them or pull for one of the Mercedes powered teams. Either way, thank you so much guys for being here. If you liked what you saw and you've had a good time, do me a favor and hit that like button. Smash that subscribe button, ding the notifications bell, leave some comments and some love down below. Where are you watching from? I can't wait to take it all in. Guys, it's race weekend. Anyway, like Ja Rule's acting career, we're out.